The story begins with Joseph declaring the immediate termination of their engagement, his voice booming through the ornate room with a finality that shatters the air. He looms over Bridget, his expression twisted into a scowl of absolute rejection, refusing to entertain any defense she might attempt to mount. He accuses her of harboring deep-seated jealousy toward Lisa, claiming she has bullied and harassed the other girl from the shadows, hidden from his view but not from his knowledge. Bridget stands frozen, her eyes wide with shock as the man she loves dismantles their future with contemptuous ease, insisting she knows exactly why this is happening. He leans in, his glare piercing, and delivers a scathing ultimatum. She is never to approach him or Lisa ever again, effectively banishing her from his life. The narrative shifts backward in time to the root of this rejection, anchoring in a memory that haunts Bridget. In a grand, high-ceilinged ceremonial hall, a young Bridget kneels on the cold floor, cradling a small, indistinct spirit within a protective sphere of light. The officiant announces her fate to the gathered crowd, declaring her contracted spirit to be a nameless one, a designated failure in a society obsessed with spiritual hierarchy. Her father stands in the foreground, his face a mask of cold disappointment, turning away from his kneeling daughter without a word of comfort. Bridget looks up, sweat beading on her forehead, sensing the crushing weight of her family's shame descending upon her. The memory twists into a nightmare where she pleads desperately with her father, begging him not to abandon her, crying out that she is his child. But the dream version of her father remains ruthless, stating that if she were truly his offspring, she would have contracted a high-ranking spirit, invalidating her very existence based on the creature's status. Bridget jolts awake in her darkened bedroom, gasping for air as the phantom rejection constricts her chest. She clutches the fabric of her nightgown over her heart, the physical ache of a heartbreak that happened over a year ago still throbbing with fresh intensity. She sits up, hair disheveled, sweat clinging to her skin, acknowledging that the pain has not dulled despite the passage of time. Sunlight filters through the window as the door creaks open, admitting Sienna, Bridget's personal maid. Bridget asks if anyone visited the villa the previous day, a question laden with a sliver of hope. Sienna pauses, her expression softening into pity, before confirming the harsh reality. No one came, and she doubts anyone will come in the future. The maid predicts that Bridget's parents will inevitably hear about the recent events, implying that their absence is a deliberate act of distancing rather than ignorance. Sienna observes her mistress, noting that Bridget is already awake, and prepares to help her start the day in their isolated sanctuary. Sienna gently broaches the subject of the previous day's incident, verifying that Bridget remembers the confrontation with the third prince at the party. The maid confirms that the news of Joseph breaking the engagement has already spread, becoming common knowledge among the social circles. Sienna lowers her gaze, her fists clenching slightly as she apologizes for her inability to intervene or protect Bridget from the public humiliation she endured. Tears well in the maid's eyes as she expresses her deep regret, knowing exactly what her mistress is suffering. Bridget, touched by this singular display of loyalty, wraps her arms around Sienna, pulling the maid into a comforting embrace. She reassures Sienna, acknowledging that the maid has always taken good care of her, and dismisses the need for an apology. In the safety of her room, Bridget reflects on the irony of her situation. She realizes she was the one who failed to listen, her mind drifting to a montage of memories involving Joseph. She recalls how he was the only person who showed her kindness when she was a child, a time when her own family branded her a disappointment and the ugly duckling of the Fire Clan for contracting a nameless spirit. The flashback vividly depicts a young Joseph approaching a solitary Bridget in a library, asking her what she is reading with a gentle smile that contrasted sharply with the scorn she received from everyone else. The memory deepens, revealing the conversation that cemented her love for him. Young Bridget, clutching a book about spirits, had confessed her fascination with the entities, admitting that despite her fear and inexperience, she found them beautiful. She confided in Joseph about her encounter with a contracted spirit and her ambitious dream to become a spirit researcher in the future. Instead of mocking her, Joseph had praised her resolve, calling her amazing for having a dream and working toward it. He had listened intently, his eyes warm, making her feel seen and valued for the first time. He had encouraged her passion, suggesting that the spirits surely loved the attention she gave them, and asked for her name, initiating a bond she thought would last forever. Back in the present, Bridget sits at a table, forcing herself to eat the soup Sienna prepared. She acknowledges the warmth of having at least one ally left in her life, even as she accepts that the kind Joseph from her memories is gone, replaced by the cold stranger who discarded her. After eating, she attempts to commune with her spirit, whispering into the air and hoping for a sign. A small, faint distortion appears, but there is no answer. She sighs, resigning herself to the continued silence of her nameless companion, a stark reminder of her lack of power. Bridget arrives at the Otoliana Magic Academy, where the social fallout of the breakup greets her immediately. Students line the hallways, whispering loudly as she passes. They sneer at her, calling her the Red Fairy, and mocking her poor academic performance, noting her terrible test scores from the other day. The gossip confirms that she has lost her title as the third prince's fiancée, and the students wonder aloud how someone could live with such shame. Bridget keeps her head high but hears every word, the insults piercing her composure as she walks through the corridor, acutely aware that she is the subject of everyone's scorn. She turns a corner and stops abruptly. Directly ahead, Joseph stands in conversation with another student. Bridget recognizes the second figure as Yuri Aurealis, the heir to the Water Clan. The atmosphere in the hallway shifts instantly, becoming charged with tension. Bridget attempts to navigate the situation by offering a formal greeting to Yuri, simply wanting to acknowledge his presence. However, Joseph instantly steps in, blocking her attempt with hostility. He accuses her of being disrespectful to royalty and claims she is acting cold and rude, mirroring the behavior he alleges she showed toward Lisa. Bridget defends herself, explaining that she treats everyone with the same level of formal equality and that she intends no disrespect. Joseph rejects her explanation, his face darkening. He insists that while she might claim equality, her demeanor is icy and unwelcoming. He cites her interaction with Lisa as proof, claiming Bridget responded to Lisa's greeting with a coldness that bordered on cruelty. Bridget recalls the interaction differently, remembering that she responded pleasantly, yet Joseph refused to smile or acknowledge her effort. She argues that she expects a basic level of reciprocal courtesy, noting that others usually smile back when she greets them, implying that Joseph's perception is skewed by his bias. Joseph escalates the verbal attack, asserting his closeness to Lisa and positioning himself as her defender against Bridget's supposed malice. He dismisses Bridget's defense as the usual accusations from the Selmine family, twisting her attempt at civility into a narrative of harassment. Yuri Aurealis stands silently by, observing the scene with a detached, almost bored expression. When Bridget glances at him, Yuri simply asks, "Okay, and? What does that have to do with me?" effectively dismissing Joseph's drama as irrelevant to his own existence. Suddenly, the air pressure in the corridor drops. A massive wolf spirit, radiating power and danger, erupts from the shadows behind Yuri. It bares its fangs and unleashes a low, thunderous growl directly at Joseph. The prince recoils, his eyes widening in genuine fear as the beast, identified as Fenrir, asserts its dominance. The students in the hallway gasp, and even Joseph's confidence shatters in the face of the high-ranking spirit. Yuri remains completely calm, explaining that Fenrir emerged on its own accord because it sensed danger, specifically, the hostility radiating from Joseph. He frames the incident as a natural defense mechanism of his spirit, subtly criticizing Joseph's aggression without raising his own voice. Joseph, intimidated by the sheer power of the Aurealis heir's spirit, decides to cut his losses. He grits his teeth, muttering that he will let the matter slide for today. He turns to call for Lisa, signaling a retreat. He walks away, his posture stiff, leaving the confrontation unresolved but clearly having lost the upper hand. Bridget watches him go, her gaze then shifting to Yuri, who recalls his spirit with a casual gesture, seemingly unaffected by the fact that he just stared down a member of the royal family. Bridget analyzes Yuri as the hallway clears. She notes his cold, brusque demeanor and acknowledges that, like her, he is disliked by the general student body for his unapproachable nature. However, she sees something else in him, a steadfast refusal to bend. Despite his isolation and the hatred directed at him, Yuri remains true to himself, looking straight ahead without seeking validation. Bridget feels a surge of admiration for his strength. She realizes he is a noble with no lovable qualities in the traditional sense, yet his independence makes him cool in her eyes. She finds herself wishing she could possess that same level of self-assurance. Yuri interrupts her internal monologue, speaking to her directly for the first time. He expresses mild surprise that she showed up to the academy today, considering the public humiliation she recently endured. He identifies her as the Count's daughter, his tone factual rather than mocking. Bridget looks at him, surprised by the acknowledgement. The interaction serves as a catalyst for her own internal shift. As she walks away, a new resolve hardens within her. She realizes that Joseph is no longer protecting her, which means she is forced to face the world head-on. This realization transforms from fear into liberation. Bridget understands that since she is no longer Joseph's fiancée, the restrictive expectations placed upon her have vanished. She tells herself that the breakup is an opportunity. She can now live her life exactly as she wants. She can date whoever she chooses. She considers changing her makeup, discarding the look she maintained for Joseph's sake. The weight of the engagement lifts, replaced by a sense of autonomy she hasn't felt in years. Her focus shifts immediately to her academic redemption. She marches into the library and slams a stack of heavy books onto a desk. She acknowledges that her grades have plummeted to the bottom of the class because she neglected her studies to chase after the prince. She picks up a book titled, The History of Research into Spirits, determining that it is time to reclaim her original dream. She tells herself that becoming a spirit researcher is not impossible if she applies herself. She remembers that she always enjoyed studying before her life became consumed by the engagement. Bridget immerses herself in the library atmosphere, ignoring the whispers of, "It's the Red Fairy," from other students nearby. She focuses entirely on the shelves, searching for a specific volume to aid her renewed academic campaign. She spots the book she needs and reaches out for it. At the exact moment her fingers brush the spine, another hand reaches for the same book. She stops and looks up, tracing the other person's arm. Standing on the other side of the shelf, looking back at her with the same intense, unreadable expression, is Yuri Aurealis. Their paths cross once again, this time not in a hallway of conflict, but in the quiet pursuit of knowledge, signaling a new chapter in Bridget's life. Bridget's hand freezes in midair as another hand, pale and decisive, snatches the volume from the shelf right before her fingers can graze the spine. She stares, dumbfounded, as Yuri Aurealis stands on the opposite side of the bookcase, the coveted book now firmly in his grasp. He speaks with a flat, detached tone, stating simply that he intends to read it first. He glances at her through the gap in the shelves, his expression unreadable, and asks her to move her hand. Bridget recoils, her heart pounding, realizing she has just crossed paths with the formidable heir of the Water Clan in the most awkward manner possible. She watches him, her mind racing to process the identity of the man standing before her. He leans against the shelf, already flipping through the pages with a casual arrogance that leaves her breathless. She recognizes him not just by his face, but by his overwhelming reputation. He is the fourth son of the Aurealis family, the highest-ranking line of dukes within the Water Clan. He is an anomaly, a prodigy who defied the natural laws of their world by contracting with two high-ranking spirits simultaneously, a feat considered impossible for ordinary mages who can typically only handle one. He is the genius who tops every subject in the Magic Academy, possessing extraordinary talent and education. Yuri glances up from the pages, his eyes sharp and cold. He perceives her internal turmoil but dismisses it, bluntly telling her to shut up. Bridget bristles at the command, thinking that the rumors were true. He truly is a villainous figure with an arrogant attitude, even toward royalty. Yuri ignores her indignation and snaps the book shut. He looks at her with a bored expression and declares that he has already memorized everything he needs from the text. Bridget blinks, unable to comprehend his claim. The book is a dense, difficult academic text with hundreds of pages, yet he handled it for mere moments. Yuri holds the cover up to her face, testing her. He asks if she knows the book. The wind laughs. Bridget stammers, admitting she knows it more or less. Yuri's gaze narrows, sensing a lie or perhaps expecting ignorance. He remarks that it is unexpected for her to know it, as there is no other book quite like it in the field of spirit research. Feeling her intelligence being questioned, Bridget's demeanor shifts from shock to defensiveness. She asserts that she knows the book well, explaining that she became interested in the author, Mr. Lean, and repeatedly read the translated versions of his work. She speaks with rising passion, detailing how Mr. Lean was a leading researcher despite being in a situation similar to hers, someone who could only form contracts with insignificant spirits. She describes how she immersed herself in his narrative style, imagining the scenery of the spirit world he described, finding solace in his words. She finishes her explanation, admitting she just wanted to read the original text again to study the spirit language used in specific parts. Yuri listens to her outburst, his expression shifting from boredom to mild intrigue. He studies her face, connecting the dots in his mind. He asks if she is really Count Maidel's daughter. Before she can confirm, he states matter-of-factly that he heard the third prince's fiancée was an unruly and stupid girl. He corrects himself, noting that he heard the engagement was cancelled, so she is now just another single girl. Bridget gasps, appalled that he would say something so insulting directly to her face without a shred of ill intent, delivering the insult as if it were a simple observation of the weather. Suddenly, a librarian steps out from behind the shelves, adjusting his glasses and sternly asking them to be quiet in the library. Yuri immediately shifts the blame, agreeing that using a loud voice is a breach of etiquette and promising to tell Bridget to be quiet. He lectures her on common sense, asking her to consider how he feels being asked his thoughts on a book he hasn't even heard of, twisting the situation to make her the aggressor. Bridget flushes with embarrassment and apologizes to the librarian, but as soon as the man leaves, she turns her fury back to Yuri. Yuri begins to walk away, dismissing her with a wave of his hand, stating he doesn't have time to hang out with her. Bridget pursues him, demanding a moment of his time. They exit the library and stand near a gazebo on the school grounds. Bridget confronts him, demanding to know if he was making fun of her. She lectures him, explaining that words have power, a fundamental concept in magic where chanting activates spells. She insists that he cannot go around calling people stupid, or even implying it. Yuri cuts her off, looking bored. He counters that he can use magic without chanting, rendering her lecture moot. He clarifies his earlier statement, explaining that he never actually called her stupid. He admits that he simply thought the rumors about her being unruly and stupid were untrustworthy because she seemed knowledgeable in the field of spirit research during their conversation. Bridget pauses, realizing that in his own twisted way, he was actually acknowledging her intelligence. However, Yuri's curiosity remains unsatisfied. He looks at her intensely and asks why she was pretending to be stupid. Bridget flinches, the question striking a nerve. She hesitates, then quietly admits the truth. She explains that Joseph, her only ally at the time, told her he liked stupid, cute girls. A montage of memories floods Bridget's mind, depicting the toxic reality of her engagement. She recalls Joseph sitting on a throne-like chair, surrounded by sycophants, telling her that a girl who gets better test grades than her fiancé is the worst. She remembers him demanding she distract him from his boredom, instructing her to scream at others every day. He had insulted her intelligence, betting the inside of her head was the same color as the pink dresses he forced her to wear. He told her she could put on a thicker layer of makeup to the point where her old face was unrecognizable. Bridget confesses to Yuri that she continued behaving exactly as Joseph wished because when she did, he was kind to her and praised her. She reveals that the real her is actually a shy and weak girl, but she maintained the act of an arrogant, vapid noblewoman solely to receive that praise. Yuri stares at her, his expression unreadable for a moment before he speaks. He asks if she is stupid. He dissects her actions with ruthless logic, pointing out that doing things others wouldn't understand, changing her makeup, clothes, speech pattern, and personality all for one person, is inherently foolish. He questions the point of such love. Bridget tries to defend herself, saying that love makes people do strange things, but Yuri cuts her down. He suggests that Joseph was likely happy she fell for his manipulation, but emphasizes that blaming her behavior on love is just an excuse. He leans in, his eyes cold and piercing. He tells her that she is usually quite stupid for allowing this to happen. Bridget snaps. The repetition of the word, stupid, breaks her composure completely. She screams at him, demanding to know whose fault he thinks it is. She yells that he didn't have to say it like that, her voice vibrating with such intensity that Yuri flinches, covering his ear and calling her noisy. She accuses him of being extremely rude to a girl in love. Breathing heavily, Bridget makes a decision. She refuses to be looked down upon any longer. She glares at Yuri and issues a challenge, a competition. She proposes they compete to see who gets a higher grade on the next written exam. Yuri looks at her, surprised. He mentions that despite his current demeanor, he was called a prodigy even as a baby. He asks if she understands the stakes, reminding her that since he entered the school, he has been top of the class in every single test. Bridget stands her ground, her eyes burning with determination. She asks if it sounds fun. She sets the terms. The loser has to listen to any one thing the winner says. Yuri smirks, his interest finally piqued. He accepts her challenge, asking if she is scared of losing. He taunts her, asking if she is ready to become his slave, confident that it will be his victory. Bridget clenches her fists, her shy persona completely gone. She fires back, telling him to prepare himself, signaling the start of a fierce academic rivalry. A star-filled sky, the quiet of the night enveloping the Maydell villa. Inside the library, Bridget kneels on the floor, rummaging through the lower shelves. She pulls out a stack of books and turns to her maid, requesting the study materials she had previously put away. Sienna stands frozen, her eyes widening in disbelief as she processes the request. She stammers, reminding Bridget that she hasn't touched a book since Prince Joseph explicitly ordered her not to study. The maid recalls the days when Bridget refused to even look at study materials, no matter how much Sienna worried, adhering strictly to the prince's controlling command. Bridget confirms her intention, declaring that she plans to put effort into the upcoming test. Sienna's shock transforms instantly into fiery determination. She clenches her fists, tears forming in her eyes, and vows to support Bridget with all her strength. She encourages her mistress to get a good grade and strike back at the royals who treated her so poorly. The narrative briefly overlaps with the memory of the challenge issued to Yuri Aurealis. The loser of the exam must listen to any one command from the winner. Bridget laughs nervously, realizing she has engaged in a battle she absolutely cannot afford to lose. Back in the present, Bridget's resolve hardens. She questions if a failure of the Flame clan can truly defeat a genius, but she quickly dismisses the doubt, telling herself she cannot lose. She turns to Sienna with a new request, asking the maid to bring out the clothes she bought for Joseph to admire. Sienna presents the frilly, ribbon-laden dresses, and Bridget decides to change her image entirely. She suggests getting rid of them, but Sienna, misunderstanding the sentiment as a need for emotional catharsis, enthusiastically offers to burn the dress to cheer her up. Before Bridget can clarify, Sienna practically vibrates with intensity, promising to use all her strength to incinerate the garments. The scene shifts to the Academy Library, where the atmosphere buzzes with whispers. Students glance sideways, murmuring about the Count's daughter and questioning what she is doing. Bridget sits at a desk, pen moving furiously across paper, ignoring the scoffs of those calling her the Red Fairy. The onlookers mock her, finding it hilarious that she is trying to act as if she took no damage from the public breakup. Joseph and Lisa enter the hallway outside the library. Lisa spots Bridget studying and freezes, her expression tightening. She tugs at Joseph's sleeve, pointing out that Bridget is behaving strangely by studying with such zeal. Joseph glances over, dismissive and arrogant, remarking that it is no wonder he left such a stupid girl. Lisa, masking her anxiety with a bright smile, agrees that Bridget is stupid and that studying is useless for her, predicting a horrible result for her rival. Lisa then pivots the conversation to their own relationship, suggesting it might be time to let her parents know about them. Joseph hesitates, his expression guarding his reputation. He argues that getting engaged to a new girl immediately after breaking off another engagement would make him look bad. He suggests they wait until things settle. Lisa presses him, asking if he really thinks about her, to which Joseph gives a practiced, smooth reply that he always thinks of her first. However, Lisa's internal monologue reveals a darker, more manipulative nature. As she watches Bridget, she calculates her next move. She resolves to do whatever is necessary, fearing that if Bridget miraculously scores higher than her, Joseph will be disappointed. Her mind drifts to a malicious contingency plan. If pushed into a corner, she will drive Bridget down with false rumors, just like she did in the past. Back in the library, Yuri Aurealis approaches Bridget's desk. He looks down at her with a cool, detached demeanor and notes that she is surprisingly following through with the challenge. He admits he thought she would surrender, considering it a rash decision. Bridget snaps back, telling him to stop speaking nonsense and that she has no intention of stopping. She proudly displays her progress, claiming she has completed a significant amount in 2 days. Yuri leans over her shoulder, his eyes scanning her notebook. He immediately points to a section and declares it incorrect. As Bridget stammers, he explains that in spirit language, the meaning changes depending on the context. He advises her to refer to a similar situation for the correct translation, effortlessly demonstrating the gap in their academic abilities. Bridget, trying to regain some footing, asks Yuri about his own magic. She notes that using spirit language in everyday life would be useful but admits the magic she can use is restricted because her contracted spirit has a minuscule amount of power. She asks if Yuri talks to his spirits, acknowledging that he contracted 2 of the highest rank. Yuri looks away, answering vaguely. He mentions that one of them talks when it feels like it, describing it as a child, while the other talks quite a bit about the state of the spirit world. Bridget stares at him, struggling to reconcile the image of high-ranking spirits with such mundane descriptions. Yuri catches her staring and mocks her, saying she is making a dumb face. He advises her to sink her teeth into a book if she wants to beat him rather than wasting time in a daze. He then offers her a handicap, asking if he should take one since she seems so worried. Bridget explodes with indignation, yelling that she definitely does not need a handicap. Yuri laughs off her outburst, claiming he got tinnitus from her high-pitched shrieking. The mood shifts abruptly when Yuri asks a piercing question, "Why did you contract some no-name spirit?" The question triggers a traumatic memory for Bridget. She is transported back to her childhood, where her mother looks at her with cold disdain, asking if it was her fault for birthing such a bad child. Her mother compares her unfavorably to her father, who contracted a high-ranking spirit, and laments the shame brought upon the Maydell family. Bridget snaps back to reality to find Yuri staring at her. He asks if she is okay, noting that she doesn't seem fine despite her insistence. He asks again if she is going to surrender, suggesting it might be better to resign early rather than ruin her health by overworking herself in a battle she is destined to lose. Bridget refuses, slamming her hand on the desk. She declares she has other reasons to try her best, implying stakes higher than just academic pride. When Yuri asks what those reasons are, she stammers, promising to tell him only if he wins the challenge. Yuri accepts this, commenting on her impressive vigor before turning to leave. He tells her to be careful not to push herself too hard. As he exits, Bridget notices something on her shoulders. She realizes she is draped in a blanket that wasn't there before. She touches the fabric, stunned by the realization that despite his harsh words and arrogance, Yuri might actually be worried about her. The morning sun pierces the horizon, signaling the arrival of the decisive day. Bridget Maydell stands in the center of the academy hall, her posture rigid with determination. She casts a sharp, challenging gaze toward the back of the room, her internal monologue filled with a fiery resolve to crush her opponent. She vows that after all her preparation, she will secure a victory so absolute it will bring him to tears. In contrast to her intensity, Yuri Aurealis sits quietly at his desk, his expression composed but his eyes sharp. He acknowledges the weight of the challenge. His opponent is a renowned genius, and he calculates that to secure a win, he cannot afford a single error. The curriculum for the day is grueling, spanning anthropology, history, spiritualism, herbology, fundamentals of magic, and concluding with the notorious applications of magic. The atmosphere in the exam hall shifts as the students settle. Whispers circulate among the rows. Two female students, Kira and the ringleader Lisa, exchange meaningful, malicious glances. Lisa smirks, signaling Kira that the rest of their plan is now in motion, confident that their machinations will ensure Bridget's downfall. The invigilator commands silence, and the heavy doors close. The exam begins. Yuri moves his quill with precision, breezing through the initial subjects. However, as he reaches the final section on applied magic, his rhythm breaks. He discovers a scrap of paper tucked amidst his materials. The note reads "Clean Bridget's answer sheet" and is signed Brownie. His eyes narrow as he processes the implication. Someone has deployed a spirit to sabotage the exam. He realizes the integrity of the test has been compromised. Meanwhile, Bridget faces a surreal nightmare. As she furiously inscribes her answers for the applied magic section, the ink barely settles on the page before it vanishes. Hovering directly above her desk is a small, spherical spirit with a single leaf sprouting from its head. The creature acts with impunity, wiping away her calculations as fast as she writes them. Bridget watches in horror as her hard work dissolves into blank parchment. She realizes this is a contracted spirit, a method used to bypass the teacher's anti-magic countermeasures which only target direct spellcasting, not the actions of independent entities. Panic threatens to paralyze her. She understands the trap she is in. If she raises her hand to complain, the spirit will simply vanish or cease its action, making her appear as a liar making excuses for a blank sheet. The speed of the erasure is overwhelming, taking one section at a time. Bridget trembles, her mind racing for a counter-strategy. She lacks the magical means to bind or stop the spirit without drawing attention. However, a surge of pride cuts through her despair. She remembers her resolve to live fairly and squarely, mirroring the integrity of the person she admires. She refuses to yield to such underhanded malice. Gripping her quill until her knuckles turn white, she forces herself to rewrite the answers, engaging in a futile race against the invisible eraser, determined to salvage every possible point until the bell rings. Days later, the tension in the academy reaches its peak as the results are posted. A crowd gathers around the bulletin board, the air thick with chatter. Bridget stands before the list, her face draining of color as she processes the numbers. Yuri approaches her from behind, his demeanor calm. He inquires about her score. Bridget, voice barely above a whisper, admits to achieving 538 out of 600 points. Yuri analyzes the data instantly. She achieved perfect scores in the first 5 subjects, yet failed the final one. He notes the statistical anomaly. It is approximately 60 points lower than his own score. Bridget hangs her head, conceding defeat. She acknowledges the terms of their wager, stating she will fulfill any one request he desires. Yuri, however, does not gloat. He questions the result, finding it illogical that she would barely pass the subject she studied most rigorously. He asks if she intentionally threw the match. Bridget denies this vehemently. Yuri then reveals his hand. He saw the spirit in the exam hall. He deduces that someone used a contracted spirit to bypass the magical security. He explains that he, too, was a target of the interference. Bridget looks at him in shock, realizing he faced the same erasure. Yuri shrugs off the difficulty, explaining his solution was simple brute force. He merely answered the questions faster than the spirit could erase them, and rewrote the ones that vanished. He characterizes the sabotage as a standard experience for the most hated student in the academy, framing his perfect performance as merely scraping by. Bridget stares at him, half appalled and half awed by his nonchalance. She mutters that he sounds like a villain, a comment he dismisses with a wave of his hand. The conversation shifts to a bench outside, where the atmosphere softens. Yuri compliments her proficiency in magic theory, noting her aptitude. Bridget blushes, revealing the source of her knowledge. She confesses that she reads educational books voraciously because her dream is to become a spirit doctor. She admits she had given up on the dream after her engagement, but the desire to understand and heal spirits remains. Yuri listens intently, validating her ambition. He tells her that attempting the impossible is commendable, not strange. Yuri then admits that despite his victory, he didn't feel like he truly caught up to her. He describes her as a massive wall he had to scale, and the fact that a former low-ranking student like him could rival her feels like magic itself. He declares the match void due to the foul play involved. He refuses to accept a win tainted by interference. As they prepare to part ways, Yuri pauses. He requests that she stop using his family name. He dislikes being called Aurealis. He asks her to call him Yuri. Bridget flusters, her cheeks flushing a deep red. She stammers but eventually manages to say his given name. He smiles, reciprocating by calling her Bridget, cementing a new, closer bond between them. The scene shifts to a darker corner of the academy. Lisa confronts Kira, her face twisted in a mask of fury. She demands to know why the sabotage failed to destroy Bridget's ranking completely. Lisa points a trembling finger at the results board. Bridget still managed to rank 30th despite the spirit's interference, while Lisa plummeted to 87th. Lisa screeches that Bridget must have used a dirty trick to salvage her score. Before Kira can respond, a cold shadow falls over them. Yuri steps into view, his eyes icy. He startles the girls, who ask why he is there. Yuri ignores their feigned innocence and cuts straight to the point. He reveals he knows they are the culprits behind the exam foul play. He explains that he analyzed Bridget's erasure pattern and determined that without the spirit's interference, she would have achieved a perfect score identical to his. He steps closer to Lisa, his presence menacing. He states flatly that he hates unfair fights. He issues a terrifying warning. If Lisa ever attempts to interfere with Bridget again, he will not overlook it. He leaves the bullies trembling in his wake, walking away with a satisfied smile, his thoughts drifting back to the girl he protected. The atmosphere in the lecture hall shifts from academic rigor to palpable anticipation as the instructor, Marjorie Na, announces the curriculum for the upcoming session. She commands the students to summon their contracted spirits for a practical assessment, framing the exercise as a test of the bond and mutual trust between master and spirit. She dismisses the class with a cheerful wave, instructing them to prepare for the lesson on creating relationships with spirits. Bridget Maydell sits at her desk, a knot of anxiety tightening in her chest. Despite her lineage as the daughter of Count Maydell and her genuine passion for spirit studies, she is paralyzed by a glaring inadequacy. She has yet to meet or contract with a single spirit. Her internal panic is interrupted by the approach of Nival Weir, the class president, who looms over her desk with a veneer of polite condescension. He offers a backhanded congratulation regarding her performance on the recent written exam, his tone dripping with skepticism. Nival leans in, his expression hardening into an accusatory glare. He questions the legitimacy of her sudden academic success, noting that her grades had historically been poor. He hypothesizes that she utilized a spirit to cheat, yet immediately contradicts himself by musing that a spirit incapable of basic day-to-day magic, implying the type she would attract, would be useless for such a feat. He leaves her with a sneering wish for her to have fun in the next lesson, confident that her lack of ability will be exposed publicly. Bridget watches him leave, the weight of his words pressing down on her. She acknowledges the dire reality of her situation. Despite exhausting every method she knows, she has failed to make contact with any spirit. A sense of foreboding washes over her as she contemplates the upcoming practical task. Desperate for a solution, Bridget resolves to seek counsel from someone who understands her unique predicament and possesses deep knowledge of spirits. She finds herself in the academy gardens, approaching Yuri. Yuri turns, surprised that she initiated the meeting, noting that she is the one who called him there today. To demonstrate the nature of spirit contracts, Yuri summons his own partner. The air shimmers, and a magnificent entity manifests, Undine, the highest-class water spirit. Bridget stares in awe at the spirit's ethereal beauty. Undine, floating with an air of regal grace, observes Bridget and comments on her straightforward nature. Bridget stammers an apology, overwhelmed by the presence of such a high-ranking being, admitting it is her first interaction with a spirit of this caliber. Bridget introduces herself, and Undine's eyes narrow in recognition at the name Maydell. The spirit recalls that Bridget's father is contracted to Ifrit, the highest-class fire spirit, and notes the burning red hair that signifies a child of the fire clan. Undine drifts closer, her liquid form hovering intimately around Bridget. She inspects the girl with a piercing gaze and drops a cryptic revelation: Bridget is already contracted. However, Undine describes the entity as an insignificant spirit, causing Bridget to recoil in confusion. Undine expresses disappointment that neither Bridget nor Yuri has realized the truth of the situation. When pressed for details, Undine becomes playful, refusing to elaborate. She claims it is a secret and that keeping them in the dark will make the future more interesting. Before vanishing, she leaves them with a somber warning: there is unsettling spirit activity permeating the academy, implying a looming threat. Left alone with Yuri, Bridget finally voices her request. She asks for advice on how to call a contracted spirit for the upcoming class. Yuri looks at her with a deadpan expression, remarking that in his experience, spirits appear of their own accord to the point of annoyance. As if to prove his point, a voice calls out to him. A spirit named Joseph addresses Yuri with extreme reverence, calling him Your Majesty and expressing honor at being summoned. The narrative perspective shifts abruptly to a dim corridor where Nivel stands trembling before a terrifying upperclassman. The blonde noble, his eyes cold and unforgiving, delivers a crushing verdict. Nivel is to be removed from the list of candidates for his retainer. He compares Nivel unfavorably to his brother, who successfully serves the second prince, and cites Nivel's declining grades as a disgrace to the Weir family's history of royal service. The noble declares Nivel incompetent and asserts that he has found a more suitable replacement. Nivel, desperate and sweating, begs for one last chance to prove his worth. The noble pauses, his gaze shifting with malicious intent. He offers Nivel a cruel ultimatum: if he can drive the Red Fairy, Bridget Maydell, out of the academy by bringing her shame, he might reconsider. He manipulates Nivel's insecurity, reinforcing the idea that the academy has no place for failures like her. The scene returns to the training grounds for the practical lesson. The air buzzes with magic as students successfully summon their partners. Cries of delight erupt as fairies, Jack Frosts, and salamanders materialize around the courtyard. Nivel stands amidst the celebration, his eyes scanning the crowd until they land on a familiar, small, spherical spirit hovering near Bridget, the brownie. He recognizes it immediately as the spirit used to sabotage the written exam. A surge of vindictive opportunity courses through him. He calls forth his own partner, Ariel, a middle-class wind spirit known for its gentle nature and high loyalty. However, Nivel's command is not one of display, but of aggression. He unleashes a blade of wind toward Bridget. The attack is intercepted, and the teacher, unaware of the malicious intent, praises Nivel for the display of power and control. Emboldened by the praise and his desperate mission, Nivel turns his aggression verbal. He publicly mocks Bridget, declaring that she has contracted a worthless, nameless spirit, and asserting that it is impossible for someone like her to perform the summoning. Bridget stands her ground, her expression shifting from fear to defiance. She questions the fundamental values of the institution, asking if an academy that rejects those who struggle with magic is truly necessary. Her words strike a nerve. Nival snaps, screaming that she is an incompetent who cannot even take a lesson properly. The teacher intervenes sharply. She admonishes Nival, stating that his behavior is unbefitting of a class head. She reminds him that his role is to encourage those falling behind, not to ridicule them. She orders him to leave the grounds to cool his head. This public reprimand shatters Nival's remaining composure. He screams in protest, arguing that he is the one putting in the hard work while Bridget is unjustly defended. His emotional instability bleeds into his magic. Ariel, reacting to its master's turbulent state, goes berserk. A violent vortex of wind erupts from the spirit, whipping the training grounds into a frenzy. Nival, now unhinged, screams that he is different from Bridget and destined to be the retainer for His Highness Joseph. The wind intensifies, knocking students to the ground and tearing through the courtyard. In the center of the chaos, the distorted figure of Ariel looms over Bridget, delivering a chilling decree: she does not belong in the traditional Odoliana Academy. From a window overlooking the grounds, Yuri observes the sudden eruption of magical energy. He recognizes the class location and realizes instantly that Bridget is at the center of the danger. Panic flares in his eyes as he witnesses the catastrophic scene unfolding below. At the prestigious traditional Otoliana Academy, the atmosphere of scholarly pursuit is violently shattered. Chaos erupts across the campus grounds as students and faculty bear witness to a catastrophic anomaly. Bridget Maydell stands at the epicenter of the commotion, her expression etched with grave concern as the situation spirals out of control. A massive, swirling vortex of wind dominates the landscape, tearing through the training grounds with the ferocity of a natural disaster. From the safety of the academy buildings, students press their faces against the glass, paralyzed by the sight of the towering tornado that threatens to consume everything in its path. Amidst the panic, a realization dawns upon the onlookers. This is not a weather phenomenon, but a magical catastrophe. The chaotic energy is identified as Ariel going completely berserk, his power lashing out in uncontrolled waves. Inside one of the classrooms, the tremors of the disturbance are felt immediately. A dark-haired student, Yuri, detects the unsettling spike in spirit activity permeating the academy. His instincts scream that Bridget is in imminent danger. Without hesitation, he rises from his seat, the sudden movement drawing the attention of his instructor and peers. The teacher, startled by the disruption, calls out to him, but Yuri offers only a curt explanation that he is feeling unwell and leaving early. He ignores the confusion left in his wake, his focus narrowing solely on the crisis outside. Yuri strides into the corridor, his demeanor shifting from student to warrior. He calls forth his familiar, shouting the name, Fenrir. In a burst of magical energy, a massive white wolf materializes, its fur bristling with power. Yuri vaults onto the beast's back, and together they dash through the academy's grand hallways, the wolf's paws thundering against the floor as terrified students scramble to get out of the way. Meanwhile, at the training grounds, the situation has become critical. Bridget stands her ground against the raging winds, her hair whipping violently around her face. She screams desperately for Nival Weir to stop the destruction. Nival, a blonde student at the heart of the storm, is being consumed by a towering, humanoid wind spirit. The entity looms over him, its form composed of gale-force winds, slowly eroding his consciousness. Nival, blinded by rage and inferiority, lashes out at Bridget, screaming that the entire disaster is her fault. He taunts her, claiming she is powerless to stop him. The Academy's automated defense mechanisms trigger in response to the overwhelming magical threat. Giant stone obelisks erupt from the earth around the perimeter of the training ground, projecting a shimmering magical barrier that seals the area completely. Bridget and the others trapped within are now cut off from the outside world, locked in a cage with the rampaging spirit. An elderly teacher watches in horror, recounting legends that aerial outbursts are capable of summoning storms that draw wind from across the entire globe. The gathered crowd fears that the barrier will not hold, remembering stories of entire villages obliterated by the natural disasters caused by such spirits. Inside the barrier, Nival's mental state deteriorates further. He clutches his face, screaming that he is not a failure. He reveals the crushing weight of his lineage, declaring himself the second son of the Weir family. He laments his failure to live up to the expectation of becoming Prince Joseph's retainer, his voice cracking with despair. The wind spirit, feeding off this negativity, threatens to drag him fully into the spirit world. Bridget realizes the gravity of the situation. If Nival loses this internal battle, he will be lost forever. Bridget makes a selfless decision. She orders the teacher to take the other students and flee, intending to face the danger alone. She resolves to save Nival, regardless of the risk to her own life. Outside the barrier, onlookers mistakenly believe that it is the president's spirit that has gone berserk, adding to the confusion. Suddenly, Yuri arrives at the perimeter of the barrier, mounted on Fenrir. He assesses the tactical situation immediately. He knows he needs to create a breach. Calling upon another spirit, he shouts, "Undine!" A powerful surge of water magic manifests, directed with surgical precision at the magical wall. The barrier, unable to withstand the concentrated assault, shatters like glass, the shards dissolving into light. Yuri bursts through the opening, closing the distance to the eye of the storm. He reaches Nival, but rather than attacking, he speaks to the boy's heart. He acknowledges Nival's desperate struggle to meet his family's high expectations. Yuri validates Nival's hard work, assuring him that no one can deny the effort he has put in up to this point. With a calm reassurance, he tells Nival that everything is going to be okay. Bridget watches this intervention, stunned. She questions why Yuri would risk himself to save them. Yuri turns to her, his expression softening slightly, and admits that he can relate to Nival's problems, hinting at his own hidden burdens. The wind spirit, Ariel, refuses to be pacified so easily. It launches a renewed assault, sending razor-sharp gusts of wind toward them. Yuri dodges with superhuman reflexes. He shouts for Ariel to stop, trying to command the spirit down. Bridget, feeling helpless in the face of such raw power, laments internally that she does not possess a contracted spirit to aid in the fight. Yuri overhears her despair and corrects her immediately. He reveals a shocking truth: she simply hasn't realized the nature of her own power yet. As he speaks, a blinding light begins to emanate from Bridget's chest, illuminating the darkened battlefield. The light intensifies, shocking everyone present, including Bridget herself. The overwhelming radiance forces the wind spirit to recoil. The chaotic energy dissipates as the light consumes the area. As the brilliance fades, the storm settles. Bridget, exhausted by the sudden awakening of her dormant power, collapses. Yuri catches her effortlessly, scooping her up into his arms. He calls out to Undine one last time to secure the area. As Bridget drifts into unconsciousness, she looks up at her savior, murmuring his name, Yuri-sama, finally recognizing the strength of the man who came to her rescue. The haze of returning consciousness, where the world is nothing but a blur of light and sound. Bridget Sand stirs from a deep slumber, her senses slowly realigning as a familiar voice penetrates the fog. She questions her location, her memory fragmented and the events leading to this moment obscured by the darkness of unconsciousness. Teacher Marjorie stands vigil by the bedside, her presence a grounding force in the disorienting aftermath. Marjorie instructs her student to open her eyes, guiding her back to the waking world with a firm yet caring command. Bridget pushes herself upright in the infirmary bed, her concern immediately shifting from herself to the well-being of those around her. Marjorie, seated calmly beside the bed, explains the sequence of events that transpired while Bridget lay insensate. The teacher reveals that Yuri and Aurealis took charge of the situation, physically carrying Bridget to safety after she collapsed. It was Yuri who, upon hearing the commotion, abandoned whatever he was doing and rushed to the scene to intervene. Marjorie confirms that due to these swift actions, everyone involved in the incident is safe. However, the resolution came with consequences for the instigator. Nival-kun has been placed under house arrest for the time being. The conversation shifts to the nature of Bridget's actions during the crisis. Marjorie attributes the safety of the students entirely to Bridget, praising the refined and wonderful magic she unleashed. The teacher describes how Bridget's power surged forth, a light shrouding her body that effectively counteracted the aerial spirit's violent outburst. Bridget listens, confused, as Marjorie mentions a nameless spirit that she supposedly possesses, a detail Bridget seems unsure of herself. Marjorie playfully pivots the topic, hinting at a certain someone who has failed to appear at her bedside. She teases that the only reason this person hasn't shown up is simply because he is a sleepyhead, casting a mischievous look toward the door. At that precise moment, the sound of urgent, heavy footsteps echoes from the hallway, tap, 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 growing louder and more frantic with each strike against the floor. The door is thrown open with force, revealing Yuri standing in the threshold, his chest heaving and sweat clinging to his face. He is breathless, his composure shattered by panic, having evidently run the entire way there. He catches the tail end of Marjorie's comment about him being asleep and incredulously repeats the accusation, offended that his desperate sprint is being characterized as laziness. He calls out Bridget's name, his eyes widening as they land on her conscious form. A moment of silent intensity passes between them. Bridget stares back, surprised by his disheveled appearance, while Yuri stares at her, his expression a mix of relief and lingering fear. Marjorie, sensing the thick atmosphere and the need for privacy, gracefully bows out. She remarks that she appears to be in the way and notes that Yuri seems to be doing fine now that he sees Bridget is awake. As the teacher departs, Yuri remains standing by the bed, his demeanor shifting as he attempts to mask his earlier panic with a facade of coolness. Yuri takes a seat, crossing his arms and legs in an attempt to project nonchalance. He scoffs at the idea that he was genuinely worried, dismissing his frantic arrival as merely a figure of speech, rather than an admission of emotional distress. However, he quickly pivots to an interrogation, demanding to know why Bridget placed herself in such a perilous situation. He acknowledges hearing about the class president's spirit going berserk but questions the logic of her involvement. Bridget, catching the undertone of his questioning, timidly asks if he was worried about her. Yuri immediately deflects, turning his head away and flatly denying he ever said such a thing. Bridget explains her motivation, stating that she attempted to persuade the president to control his spirit because she feared the damage would extend beyond just the immediate area and harm innocent people outside. She reasoned that if the aerial spirit lost control completely, the devastation would be widespread. Yuri listens but remains critical, chastising her for being reckless when she cannot even use magic to defend herself. He calls her a stupid girl for thinking she could persuade a rampaging spirit with mere words. Bridget pouts at the insult, crossing her arms. Yuri's harshness dissolves into a somber reflection. He looks down, his expression softening into regret. He admits that things would have been easier if they were in the same class, implying that his proximity would have ensured her safety. He laments that if he had only rushed in a little sooner, she wouldn't have had to get hurt. The weight of his guilt is palpable as he gazes at her, the bravado from moments ago completely gone. Reasserting his protective stance, Yuri declares that from now on, Bridget can count on him for any problems she faces. He warns that he will be very upset otherwise. The atmosphere in the room grows intimate as Yuri leans forward, invading her personal space. Bridget blushes furiously, her heart racing at his proximity. Yuri, noticing her flushed reaction, questions if she should be resting more, his face inches from hers. Bridget, overwhelmed, stammers and tries to push him away, asking him to leave or else she will have to leave instead. Yuri observes her struggle but points out that she was unconscious for a long time, implying she needs the rest. Suddenly, Yuri freezes, his intense gaze locking onto a specific spot on her face. Bridget panics, letting out a confused sound. Yuri breaks the romantic tension with a blunt observation. He asks if she was sleeping with her mouth open because she has drool marks on her face. Bridget is mortified. Yuri bursts into laughter, revealing that he was just kidding and tells her not to take him so seriously. Bridget, realizing she has been teased, covers her red face with her hands but sincerely thanks him for his concern. She touches her cheeks, feeling the heat, flustered by the rapid shift from romance to teasing. The door rattles again, interrupting the moment. A group of female classmates hesitantly enters the room, calling out to Lady Maydell. They bow their heads, thanking Bridget profusely for her actions earlier. One student explains that it was incredibly cool when Bridget stood up to the class president. They shudder to think what would have happened to them if she hadn't been there to intervene. The girls, who previously kept their distance, now ask if they can become friends with her. One of the students, a girl with glasses, admits that seeing Bridget shut down the Ariel's power gave her no choice but to admire her. She confesses that she never had the guts to speak to Bridget before because she seemed so untouchable and awesome. Another girl chimes in, saying she always had a feeling Bridget was actually a kind person. The group gathers around the bed, their admiration genuine. Bridget is stunned by this revelation. She listens to the rattling of the door and the voices of her classmates, realizing how wrong her perception had been. She thinks to herself that it must have taken courage for them to approach her. She admits internally that she thought everyone hated her, which led her to view them as enemies. Hearing their desire to be friends, she feels a wave of relief and happiness, glad that she decided to change her outlook. The mood shifts abruptly as another figure enters the room. It is Nivel, the class president. He looks humbled and defeated. The students notice a thick, metal device clamped around his neck, a demon-blocking collar. One student remarks on the harshness of the punishment. Nival stands before Bridget, his hands clenched at his sides, struggling to articulate his thoughts. The room falls silent, the only sound the clack of his movements. He stammers, trying to get the words out, his usual arrogance completely stripped away. Bridget breaks the tension, inviting him to speak his mind if he has something to say. Nival takes a breath and bows deeply, his body bending at the waist in a formal gesture of contrition. He states clearly that Bridget saved his life. He acknowledges that his actions were unforgivable but asks to be allowed to bow his head to her. Furthermore, he apologizes for always being rude to her in the past, his voice trembling with sincerity. He exhales a heavy breath and thanks her. Bridget stares at him, wide-eyed. She turns to Yuri and whispers that this must definitely be a dream. Nival snaps his head up, indignantly shouting that it is not a dream and begging her to believe him. Yuri confirms dryly that this is indeed reality. Bridget worries aloud about what would happen if Joseph were to find out about Nival bowing to her in public. Nival, regaining some composure but looking away, asks for a moment. Bridget still mutters that she feels like she is dreaming. Nival asks if she is sure about accepting his apology, noting that it isn't just about the act of bowing. He asks if she doesn't find it humiliating to have someone like him bow to her, considering she hated him. He admits that letting his spirit run wild has destroyed his career, and he likely won't get away with it, nor will his family, the Weirs. He confesses that he really did hate her. However, Nival continues, his expression softening as he recalls the incident. He explains that his spirit, Ariel, is actually kind-hearted and only rampaged because it empathized with Nival's own anger and emotions. He looks at Bridget and acknowledges that she is a kind and strong woman. He addresses her formally as Lady Bridget Maydell. He states that he is fine with his punishment regarding Ariel, but he makes one request, that she treat the spirit kindly after this. He notes that as long as he wears the collar, the spirit won't be able to talk. Nival offers his services, telling her to let him know if she ever needs help with anything from now on. Bridget initially tries to decline, saying she is fine. But Nival insists, wanting to be of use to her. He looks at her bandage and guesses correctly that she got hit on the head. Bridget hesitates, then changes her mind. She states that she does have one request. Nival listens intently. Bridget reminds him that Yuri said something similar earlier about granting a request. She smiles broadly and asks to see Ariel again. Nival is shocked by the request but agrees, reaffirming that he never goes back on his word. He prepares to summon the spirit, looking slightly bewildered by her choice. Bridget beams at him, telling him he is a surprisingly nice guy. As the scene fades, a vision of the spirit Ariel appears, expressing a desire to help everyone. The perspective shifts to the exterior of the building, where a figure stands in a window, watching the events unfold. The observer notes coldly that Nival has failed. Below, in the room, Yuri holds Bridget in a gentle embrace, the two of them finding comfort in each other's presence. The mysterious watcher ponders their next move, casting a shadow over the happy resolution. The sound of footsteps echoes sharply against the floor. Tap, 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 heralding the arrival of a frantic messenger. Lisa approaches Joseph-sama with urgency, her breath catching as she delivers a report that has already begun to circulate through the academy whispers. She informs him that the students are buzzing with the news that Bridget Maydell successfully suppressed an out-of-control spirit during class. Lisa emphasizes that this information concerns Bridget directly, knowing the weight the name carries. Lisa continues her report, her voice laced with disbelief as she describes the aftermath involving Nival. She witnessed Nival's spirit, Ariel, go on a rampage, but the shocking development is Nival's current behavior. She describes a scene of absolute servitude. Nival holds Bridget's bags and offers his hand to assist her whenever there are steps, attending to her every physical need. Lisa struggles to articulate the degradation, finally spitting out that Nival is behaving exactly like a dog. She notes the visual marker of this servitude, a weirdly patterned collar fastened around his neck, marking him as Bridget's servant. The injustice of the situation gnaws at Lisa. She exclaims that she cannot believe Nival favors that woman so much, especially considering his future role as Joseph's retainer. Joseph, however, remains cold and analytical. He questions the implication of her words, forcing Lisa to verbalize her insecurity. She stammers, deducing that if Nival favors Bridget, it implies that Lisa's own social ranking is inferior to Bridget's. Faced with Joseph's silence, panic sets in. Lisa frantically asks herself what she should do, repeating the question internally as Joseph's demeanor shifts. Joseph breaks his silence with a cruel smirk, claiming he was just messing around. Lisa tries to backtrack, claiming she misspoke, but Joseph presses on, stepping into her personal space. He whispers a poisonous thought. Bridget is an incompetent girl, so there is no logical way she could have the power to subdue Ariel. He suggests that Lisa need not worry about such lowbrow rumors, dismissing the collective witness of the student body as a mass mistake. Lisa agrees hastily, eager to escape his intensity, admitting she was just being hasty. Joseph then reveals his callous nature regarding Nival. He notes that Nival was not very capable and that he had already planned to cut ties with him regardless of this incident. The scene shifts to the academy corridors, where gossip continues to swirl. Two female students discuss a rumor about a bet between Yuri and another party. They whisper about the incident, sharing a rumor that it was actually Yuri who arrived and used his spirit to save Bridget, casting doubt on her achievement. One girl notes that regardless of the truth, it appeared that Yuri-san was genuinely interested in Bridget. In the hallway, Yuri Aurealis stands firm, declaring his intent to follow Miss Bridget wherever she goes. Bridget, looking annoyed, questions how far he intends to carry this charade. Behind them, Nival works tirelessly, carrying a stack of bags and items, sweating profusely but maintaining his servitude. Bridget sighs, looking at Nival's shimmering dedication, and worries about how this looks to Yuri. Nival insists that he will never forget how she saved him when he was in trouble, cementing his loyalty. Suddenly, Bridget halts, her attention caught by Yuri's behavior. Bridget denies the rumors internally, but the reality confronts her in the library. She demands to know what business Yuri has in the library, a place of quiet study. Yuri, leaning casually amongst the shelves, quips that he wouldn't mind being her contracted spirit, referencing the rumors. Bridget demands quiet, flustered by his teasing. She asserts that his joke isn't funny and asks him to stop, but Yuri counters that she has a similar aura, which led him to think it might be possible. Yuri, realizing he might have pushed too far or perhaps confused by his own words, pauses. He clarifies that he actually came to the library simply to read a book. Bridget, feeling the pressure of his presence, mutters that Yuri-san is a nuisance. Nival, ever the protector, overhears this and immediately offers to eliminate the threat. He asks if he should get rid of this boy, interpreting nuisance as a command for removal. Bridget panics, shouting no, and calling Nival president in her distress, telling him not to do anything. Bridget struggles to articulate her feelings. She admits internally that she came to the library specifically to meet Yuri, yet she cannot say that aloud. A library patron shushes them, demanding they keep it down. Nival, confused by her mixed signals, points out that she just called the man a nuisance. Bridget clenches her fists, trapped between her duty, her embarrassment, and her developing feelings. Yuri takes control of the situation. He calls out, "Over here," beckoning Bridget. He leads her away from Nival and the prying eyes, slipping into a secluded aisle of the library. Bridget asks why she is with him, her voice trembling. Yuri comments on Nival, noting that the noisy guy seems to feel indebted to her, perhaps even more than she realizes. Bridget agrees that Nival is loud, trying to deflect the intimacy of the moment. Yuri, however, takes offense to the idea that he is loud, muttering that he isn't nearly that bad. The atmosphere shifts abruptly. Yuri steps closer, his presence overwhelming. The sound of a heartbeat, thump, thump, fills Bridget's ears. Yuri calls her name softly. He leans in, trapping her against the bookshelf in a moment of suspended time. He asks if his proximity just stopped her from breathing. Bridget, face burning red, stammers an excuse about making noise in the library. Yuri notices the other students leaving and remarks that they are gone. Bridget, unable to handle the intensity, excuses herself and slides away, fleeing the aisle. Days pass, and the memory of the library incident haunts Bridget. Her heart races, bottom, whenever she thinks of it. She admits to herself that lately, she has been acting weird. A friend asks if she is okay, noticing her distraction. Bridget realizes she cannot even go to the library without remembering that intimate moment, and she finds herself unable to look Yuri directly in the face. Despite her attempts to avoid him, Bridget finds herself observing Yuri from afar. She spots him sitting on a garden bench, a book in his lap. She wonders why she is thinking about him again. She notices details she missed before, observing that his hands are surprisingly big. As she watches, she realizes Yuri is dozing off, his head tilting forward in sleep. She softens, thinking he must be tired. She decides it would be weird to keep avoiding him and remembers she has a book to return to him anyway, using it as an excuse to approach. Bridget approaches the sleeping Yuri, but the moment is interrupted. Yuri wakes and greets her, and Nival appears, ever the shadow. Bridget tells Nival she was hoping to be alone today. Nival refuses to leave, declaring, "Anything for you," and insisting on staying. Bridget tries to reason with him, asking if he isn't busy as the class president, but Nival ignores his duties to serve her. Bridget sighs, asking him to please not follow her every day. Yuri intervenes, his tone sharp. He warns Bridget that her position would be in jeopardy if she keeps going against the third prince. He then turns his charm on her, complimenting her lovely face, and suggesting she doesn't need to go to the library every day. Bridget, frustrated, realizes Yuri must be tired because of her persistence in avoiding him and the constant drama. The dynamic is shattered by the arrival of a new group. A voice calls out, "President?" Nival turns to see Lady Selmine and her entourage approaching. Selmine comments snidely that Nival is making the people around him uncomfortable. She claims there seems to be a misunderstanding, but her tone suggests otherwise. Bridget watches, stunned that Selmine is actually saying these things aloud. Selmine launches a verbal assault on Nival. She mocks him, saying it looks like he is having a lot of fun wearing that collar for his master. She sneers, wondering if his behavior is because his master, Bridget, is not up to par. She delivers the final blow to his dignity, calling him an honorless dog. Nival stands his ground, huffing a breath, and explains that the collar is a punishment for the incident per school orders, a fact stated in the textbook. Bridget clarifies in her mind that it is a spirit-blocking collar. Bridget steps forward to defend the situation. She states that it should be obvious the collar is not something she made him wear. She explains that Nival is a sincere student and the collar is scheduled to be removed tomorrow. Selman lets out a dismissive "Pfft." Selman's gaze snaps to Bridget, her eyes wide with malice. She asks if Bridget is making fun of her. She hurls a slur at Bridget, calling her a lowly red fairy. Selmine then asserts her dominance, claiming that Bridget got dumped by Joseph Sama, and that she, Selmine, is the woman he loves now. She warns Bridget not to dare talk to her like that. Yuri attempts to defuse the situation, asking Lady Selmine to please calm down. But Selmine is relentless. She calls Bridget a pitiful woman with no redeeming qualities, despite being from the Maydell family. She drives the knife deeper, bringing up a painful trauma from Bridget's past. She asks if Bridget's lack of qualities isn't the reason she was called a changeling by her own father. The insult hangs in the air, a cruel reference to Bridget's family history and perceived worthlessness. The jagged fragments of a traumatic memory, a psychological assault that Bridget struggles to repress. Her father's voice, distorted by rage and disappointment, echoes through her mind, accusing her of being a changeling. He demands that she try, even just a little, to live up to their expectations, his words slicing through her composure. In the present, Bridget trembles, internally begging the memory of her father to stop speaking, the label of incompetent girl searing into her psyche. The memory shifts to a scene of physical violence. She cowers, addressing him as Your Highness, screaming for him to stop as the sound of an impact reverberates. The hallucination of her father looms large, his face twisted in disgust as he delivers the ultimate rejection. He declares that his real child was replaced by a failure from the spirit world. He condemns her as a changeling, refusing to accept the weeping girl before him as his own. Bridget, in this nightmare, apologizes desperately for being a useless child, begging for forgiveness that never comes. The father's denial is absolute. He screams that she is not his child. The phantom pain of past abuse manifests in the present, her body throbbing with the memory of cracks and blows that occurred years ago. The specter of her father mocks her status as the daughter of a humble baron, questioning if she thinks she represents the third prince. He warns her against meddling in the future, commanding her to cease being a nuisance to him and the real Bridget. Reality snaps back into focus, shattering the flashback. Bridget stands trembling in the academy hallway, but she is not alone. Yuri stands before her, a shield against the hostility of Lady Selmine. Selmine, furious and trembling with indignation, warns that at this rate, the Aurealis family will become enemies of the royal family. Terrified for his safety, Bridget grips Yuri's jacket and pleads with him to stop, fearing the consequences of his defiance. She whispers her gratitude to him for covering for her, admitting that she wouldn't be able to forgive herself if he got into trouble on her behalf. Yuri, however, remains cool and detached. He glances back at her and flatly states that he wasn't covering for her. Before they can elaborate, Selmine explodes with rage, unable to contain her humiliation. Ice begins to form around her as her magic flares uncontrollably. She issues a venomous warning to Bridget. If she intends to remain engaged to the royal family, she should keep her mouth shut about this incident. Selmine places the blame for the entire mess squarely on Bridget's shoulders, regardless of whether the decisions were arbitrary or not. With a final, hateful glare, she vows that this is not over, spitting Bridget's name as a curse before storming off. Left in the wake of the confrontation, Yuri questions the meaning behind Selmine's parting threat. Bridget, however, is consumed by worry for Yuri, asking if everything will be okay. Yuri dismisses the concern, noting that Selmine has been acting erratic for a while. He then turns his analytical gaze onto Bridget, piercing through her defenses. He observes that she liked the third prince, didn't she? Bridget freezes, realizing her past affections have been exposed. Yuri deduces that the daughter of Baron Selmine is her love rival and points out that Bridget had been peeking at the prince earlier. Yuri turns and walks away, leaving Bridget to process the interaction. She watches his retreating back, acknowledging that once again, Yuri-san has saved her. She marvels that this man, usually so aloof, actually cares about her feelings. A wave of self-loathing washes over her as she reflects on how the mere mention of her father incapacitated her. She hates herself for being so weak. She admits to herself that she is jealous of Yuri, not of his status, but of his strength and kindness. Bridget hurries to catch up to him, stammering a correction. She confesses that she doesn't remember much about the prince lately because she finds herself thinking about Yuri instead. Yuri pauses, glancing back with mild surprise. Panic sets in, and Bridget frantically backpedals, claiming she only thinks about him because of the bets between them. She insists she is fixated on settling the score because she couldn't win their bet regarding the written exam. She stammers that she must settle the score, her face flushing with embarrassment. Yuri looks at her, a genuine, amused smile breaking across his face. He calls her a stupid girl, noting that she tries too hard. His expression is soft, lacking any malice, describing her effort as neither admiration nor envy. Bridget lowers her gaze, accepting the label with a quiet defeat, admitting she knows she isn't stupid but feeling the weight of his words. Suddenly, a voice shouts from the background. It is Nivel, encased in ice, yelling for Yuri to wait. He complains indignantly that while the situation has resolved, the ice around him specifically has not melted, leaving him trapped. The scene shifts to the privacy of Bridget's bedroom. She lies on her bed, thrashing her legs and burying her face in a pillow, letting out a muffled squeal of overwhelmed emotion. The realization hits her with the force of a physical blow. She actually likes him. She lists his faults. He has a sharp tongue and is a cold person, but admits that even though he is mean, she has fallen for him. Her maid, Sienna, enters the room, noting the strange noises Bridget has been making since her return. Bridget sits up abruptly, flustered, denying everything while her face burns red. Sienna, perceptive and kind, asks if something good happened, or perhaps if something is worrying her. She gently reminds Bridget that she knocked before entering and encourages her mistress to open up. Bridget hesitates, unable to voice her romantic confusion, but Sienna offers a solution to the restlessness. She suggests that Bridget might feel better if she went shopping in the royal capital for a change. Bridget agrees, realizing there are indeed things she wants to buy. They decide to go on an outing the following day to change the mood. The next day, the atmosphere is light and celebratory. Sienna helps Bridget dress, complimenting how the outfit suits her. Bridget stands before the mirror, feeling unable to calm down, her heart racing. As they walk through the town, Sienna squeals with delight, pointing out that the townspeople are looking at Bridget in awe. Sienna expresses her happiness, revealing she always wanted to tailor a dress for Bridget. Bridget notes the shift in public perception. Until now, people looked at her with disdain, whispering her name as a warning, but today, no one seems to notice her identity, allowing her to simply exist. They arrive at a magic stone shop. Bridget explains her mission. She wants to buy a magic stone as a token of appreciation for Yuri, Fenrir, and Undine, who were all very helpful to her. She stares into the glass display cases, overwhelmed by the sheer number of options. The sound of the door chiming signals a new arrival. Bridget looks up from the display case and freezes. Standing there, reflected in the glass and in person, is Yuri-san. The coincidence leaves her breathless, her internal monologue cutting off in shock. The hushed, glittering interior of the magic stone shop, where the air hangs heavy with the scent of polished glass and ancient mana. Bridget stands frozen, her breath hitched in her throat as the reflection in the display case manifests into reality. Yuri Aurealis stands behind her, his presence dominating the cramped space of the boutique. He is not alone. A tall, bespectacled attendant stands at his shoulder, observing the interaction with a keen, analytical eye. The silence is broken by the attendant, Clifford, who remarks with a hint of amusement that they seem to have some weirdly lively customers today. He asks Yuri if it isn't a good day, to which Yuri replies with a non-committal grunt, his gaze fixed intently on Bridget. Bridget's heart hammers against her ribs, bump, ba-dump, as she processes the sheer improbability of running into him here, of all places, on the very day she sought a gift for him. She realizes with a jolt that he has already noticed her, his eyes locking onto hers with unnerving precision. Yuri turns his attention to the shopkeeper, his voice cutting through the tension with casual authority. He orders 50 water and ice magic stones, pointing to the highest quality items in the case. The shopkeeper stammers, overwhelmed by the magnitude of the request, noting that these are the most expensive items of the day. Yuri dismisses the concern, stating simply that it isn't much and commanding the man to take it. He glances at the stones, noting their pretty craftsmanship, and asks the shopkeeper if he at least knows their effects. The transaction is swift, a display of wealth and power that leaves Bridget staring in disbelief. Bridget, unable to contain her bewilderment, interjects. She suggests, somewhat timidly, that it would be better if he gave such a significant gift, a collection of 9 magic systems capable of defending against attacks, to a girl he actually cherishes. She reasons that these are protective items, meant for a partner. Yuri looks at her, his expression unreadable, and delivers a flat rejection of her romantic hypothesis. He states coldly that is all the more reason not to give them, as he has no intention of getting such a partner. The rejection hangs in the air, sharp and absolute. The awkward silence is punctured by a deliberate cough from Clifford. Ahem. He steps forward, chastising the two of them for being so close yet failing to even greet one another properly. He formally introduces himself as Wisey Clifford, the attendant to the Duke of Aurealis's son. Bridget, flushing, introduces her own attendant, Sienna. Yuri, seemingly bored by the formalities, confirms his identity as Yuri Aurealis. The social dance of nobility resumes, but the undercurrent of tension remains palpable. Wisey, ever the instigator, presses his master. He asks Yuri for his opinion on Lady Bridget's outfit today, forcing the conversation into personal territory. Yuri sighs, a sound of long-suffering patience. Phew, and glances at Bridget. He offers a lukewarm assessment, stating that in his opinion, it is not bad. Bridget bristles at the backhanded compliment, demanding he be a bit more specific. Wisey chides him, suggesting that not bad is hardly sufficient praise for a lady. Yuri pauses, his gaze softening as he looks at her. The atmosphere shifts, the ambient noise of the shop fading into the background. He murmurs, almost to himself, that she looks cute as always. The words hang in the air, a sudden, devastating admission. Bridget's face erupts in heat, her cheeks burning a deep crimson. She stammers, completely disarmed by the casual intimacy of the compliment. Wisey, seizing the moment, suggests that perhaps the lady would like to have a chat with Yuri after this. Sienna, sensing an opportunity for her mistress, immediately agrees, pushing the agenda. Bridget panics, shouting, "Why would I do that?" in a desperate attempt to regain her composure. Sienna leans in, whispering teasingly that surely Bridget planned to meet him here all along. Bridget denies it vehemently, flailing her arms. No, that's not true, but her flushed face betrays her emotions. She insists she only came to hang out with Sienna, not to engineer a romantic rendezvous. The two attendants watch the interplay with knowing looks, the air thick with unsaid feelings. Yuri, perhaps sensing Bridget's distress or simply having accomplished his goal, decides to leave. He announces he will take his leave and tells Bridget he will see her the day after tomorrow at the entrance. Bridget snaps back that she knows, declaring she is not a child, but her defiance is undercut by her lingering embarrassment. As Yuri and Wisey exit the shop, the dynamic shifts. Wisey remarks on the closeness between Yuri and Bridget, his tone dripping with insinuation. He asks if it looks like they are close, to which Yuri replies affirmatively. Wisey then brings up a recent incident in front of the library, dropping a bombshell of information. He reveals that Yuri used his magic to freeze the entire surrounding area to protect Bridget. He notes with a smirk that she pissed off the gleaming sword, a title that hints at Yuri's dangerous reputation. Wisey observes that being fearless can backfire, painting Yuri's actions not just as protective, but as a territorial display of power. Meanwhile, in the corridors of power, a different kind of tension brews. Lisa, the partner of Joseph, is shown grinding her teeth in frustration. She confronts Joseph, asking where he is going. Joseph, cold and dismissive, replies that he has official business and walks away without looking back. Lisa is left seething, her jealousy boiling over. She mutters that Bridget didn't even put in the effort that she has. She vows, with a dark, obsessive intensity, that she will definitely not forgive Bridget. She pledges to do everything for the sake of Joseph-sama, her love twisting into a vengeful crusade against the woman she perceives as a threat. The narrative jumps forward to a quiet moment between Yuri and Bridget on a sunlit terrace. The subject is the upcoming Magic Stone Hunt, a 2-day practical assignment and academic tradition. Yuri explains the rules. Students must scavenge for magic stones hidden by teachers in the forest surrounding the academy. He emphasizes that knowledge of spirit ecology is essential, as stray spirits in the forest will attempt to take the stones away. To succeed, one must bargain with these spirits or use contracted spirits to find the stones. It is a test of negotiation, power, and strategy. Yuri proposes a bet, a challenge to spice up the exam. The terms are simple but dangerous. The loser must listen to any one thing the winner says. Bridget hesitates, asking if he is sure about this. Yuri smiles confidently, noting that with the help of his contracted spirits, the odds are heavily in his favor. He declares he is a bit of a spirit expert himself and does not intend to lose. Bridget, stung by his arrogance and fueled by her own desire to prove herself, accepts the challenge. She declares she is not going to lose this time, calling the bet a perfect handicap for him. Yuri then shifts the topic to the hair ornament he gave her. He asks why she didn't put it on. Bridget is taken aback, having tried to forget about the item. Yuri presses her, asking if she didn't like it. Bridget stammers that the craftsmanship is pretty and it's not that she didn't like it, but she worries that wearing it might give people the wrong idea. Yuri counters with a logical trap. There is no point to the item if she doesn't wear it. He insists she wear it from tomorrow onwards. Flustered and cornered by his logic, Bridget agrees, promising to wear it if he insists that much. The day of the Magic Stone Hunt arrives. The students gather at the forest edge, the air buzzing with anticipation. Bridget stands ready, fully prepared for the trial ahead. She wears the hair ornament, telling herself internally that she only wore it because it is an excellent magic item and there is no other meaning to it. She spots Yuri in the crowd and quickly looks away, chiding herself for the reaction. A voice interrupts her thoughts. "Miss Bridget." It is Nivel, the class president. He approaches her with a hopeful expression, suggesting they team up for the hunt. Bridget, however, has evolved. She politely but firmly declines his offer. She states, "No, thank you," and explains that she wants to try doing this with her own strength. She acknowledges that others will be working in teams, but she is determined to stand alone. Nivel looks at her, stunned. Tears prick the corners of his eyes as he is overcome with admiration. He whispers that he is mesmerized by her resolve. Inspired by her independence, he declares that he, too, will do it alone now. He vows to accomplish the task with his own power, his character arc bending towards self-reliance in her wake. The signal is given, "Begin!" and the students surge forward into the forest. Bridget stands amidst the chaos, her expression steely. She touches the hair ornament, her mind clear. She tells herself that she is doing her best for her dream. She reaffirms her goal. She has to win and leave Yuri speechless this time. With a clenched fist and a determined smile, she steps into the trial, whispering her motivation to become stronger. The hunt has begun. The story begins with Joseph declaring the immediate termination of their engagement, his voice booming through the ornate room with a finality that shatters the air. He looms over Bridget, his expression twisted into a scowl of absolute rejection, refusing to entertain any defense she might attempt to mount. He accuses her of harboring deep-seated jealousy toward Lisa, claiming she has bullied and harassed the other girl from the shadows, hidden from his view but not from his knowledge. Bridget stands frozen, her eyes wide with shock as the man she loves dismantles their future with contemptuous ease, insisting she knows exactly why this is happening. He leans in, his glare piercing, and delivers a scathing ultimatum. She is never to approach him or Lisa ever again, effectively banishing her from his life. The narrative shifts backward in time to the root of this rejection, anchoring in a memory that haunts Bridget. In a grand, high-ceilinged ceremonial hall, a young Bridget kneels on the cold floor, cradling a small, indistinct spirit within a protective sphere of light. The officiant announces her fate to the gathered crowd, declaring her contracted spirit to be a nameless one, a designated failure in a society obsessed with spiritual hierarchy. Her father stands in the foreground, his face a mask of cold disappointment, turning away from his kneeling daughter without a word of comfort. Bridget looks up, sweat beading on her forehead, sensing the crushing weight of her family's shame descending upon her. The memory twists into a nightmare where she pleads desperately with her father, begging him not to abandon her, crying out that she is his child. But the dream version of her father remains ruthless, stating that if she were truly his offspring, she would have contracted a high-ranking spirit, invalidating her very existence based on the creature's status. Bridget jolts awake in her darkened bedroom, gasping for air as the phantom rejection constricts her chest. She clutches the fabric of her nightgown over her heart, the physical ache of a heartbreak that happened over a year ago still throbbing with fresh intensity. She sits up, hair disheveled, sweat clinging to her skin, acknowledging that the pain has not dulled despite the passage of time. Sunlight filters through the window as the door creaks open, admitting Sienna, Bridget's personal maid. Bridget asks if anyone visited the villa the previous day, a question laden with a sliver of hope. Sienna pauses, her expression softening into pity, before confirming the harsh reality. No one came, and she doubts anyone will come in the future. The maid predicts that Bridget's parents will inevitably hear about the recent events, implying that their absence is a deliberate act of distancing rather than ignorance. Sienna observes her mistress, noting that Bridget is already awake, and prepares to help her start the day in their isolated sanctuary. Sienna gently broaches the subject of the previous day's incident, verifying that Bridget remembers the confrontation with the third prince at the party. The maid confirms that the news of Joseph breaking the engagement has already spread, becoming common knowledge among the social circles. Sienna lowers her gaze, her fists clenching slightly as she apologizes for her inability to intervene or protect Bridget from the public humiliation she endured. Tears well in the maid's eyes as she expresses her deep regret, knowing exactly what her mistress is suffering. Bridget, touched by this singular display of loyalty, wraps her arms around Sienna, pulling the maid into a comforting embrace. She reassures Sienna, acknowledging that the maid has always taken good care of her, and dismisses the need for an apology. In the safety of her room, Bridget reflects on the irony of her situation. She realizes she was the one who failed to listen, her mind drifting to a montage of memories involving Joseph. She recalls how he was the only person who showed her kindness when she was a child, a time when her own family branded her a disappointment and the ugly duckling of the Fire clan for contracting a nameless spirit. The flashback vividly depicts a young Joseph approaching a solitary Bridget in a library, asking her what she is reading with a gentle smile that contrasted sharply with the scorn she received from everyone else. The memory deepens, revealing the conversation that cemented her love for him. Young Bridget, clutching a book about spirits, had confessed her fascination with the entities, admitting that despite her fear and inexperience, she found them beautiful. She confided in Joseph about her encounter with a contracted spirit and her ambitious dream to become a spirit researcher in the future. Instead of mocking her, Joseph had praised her resolve, calling her amazing for having a dream and working toward it. He had listened intently, his eyes warm, making her feel seen and valued for the first time. He had encouraged her passion, suggesting that the spirits surely loved the attention she gave them, and asked for her name, initiating a bond she thought would last forever. Back in the present, Bridget sits at a table, forcing herself to eat the soup Sienna prepared. She acknowledges the warmth of having at least one ally left in her life, even as she accepts that the kind Joseph from her memories is gone, replaced by the cold stranger who discarded her. After eating, she attempts to commune with her spirit, whispering into the air and hoping for a sign. A small, faint distortion appears, but there is no answer. She sighs, resigning herself to the continued silence of her nameless companion, a stark reminder of her lack of power. Bridget arrives at the Otoliana Magic Academy, where the social fallout of the breakup greets her immediately. Students line the hallways, whispering loudly as she passes. They sneer at her, calling her the Red Fairy, and mocking her poor academic performance, noting her terrible test scores from the other day. The gossip confirms that she has lost her title as the third prince's fiancée, and the students wonder aloud how someone could live with such shame. Bridget keeps her head high but hears every word, the insults piercing her composure as she walks through the corridor, acutely aware that she is the subject of everyone's scorn. She turns a corner and stops abruptly. Directly ahead, Joseph stands in conversation with another student. Bridget recognizes the second figure as Yuri Aurealis, the heir to the Water clan. The atmosphere in the hallway shifts instantly, becoming charged with tension. Bridget attempts to navigate the situation by offering a formal greeting to Yuri, simply wanting to acknowledge his presence. However, Joseph instantly steps in, blocking her attempt with hostility. He accuses her of being disrespectful to royalty and claims she is acting cold and rude, mirroring the behavior he alleges she showed toward Lisa. Bridget defends herself, explaining that she treats everyone with the same level of formal equality and that she intends no disrespect. Joseph rejects her explanation, his face darkening. He insists that while she might claim equality, her demeanor is icy and unwelcoming. He cites her interaction with Lisa as proof, claiming Bridget responded to Lisa's greeting with a coldness that bordered on cruelty. Bridget recalls the interaction differently, remembering that she responded pleasantly, yet Joseph refused to smile or acknowledge her effort. She argues that she expects a basic level of reciprocal courtesy, noting that others usually smile back when she greets them, implying that Joseph's perception is skewed by his bias. Joseph escalates the verbal attack, asserting his closeness to Lisa and positioning himself as her defender against Bridget's supposed malice. He dismisses Bridget's defense as the usual accusations from the Selmine family, twisting her attempt at civility into a narrative of harassment. Yuri Aurealis stands silently by, observing the scene with a detached, almost bored expression. When Bridget glances at him, Yuri simply asks, "Okay, and? What does that have to do with me?" effectively dismissing Joseph's drama as irrelevant to his own existence. Suddenly, the air pressure in the corridor drops. A massive wolf spirit, radiating power and danger, erupts from the shadows behind Yuri. It bares its fangs and unleashes a low, thunderous growl directly at Joseph. The prince recoils, his eyes widening in genuine fear as the beast, identified as Fenrir, asserts its dominance. The students in the hallway gasp, and even Joseph's confidence shatters in the face of the high-ranking spirit. Yuri remains completely calm, explaining that Fenrir emerged on its own accord because it sensed danger, specifically, the hostility radiating from Joseph. He frames the incident as a natural defense mechanism of his spirit, subtly criticizing Joseph's aggression without raising his own voice. Joseph, intimidated by the sheer power of the Aurealis heir's spirit, decides to cut his losses. He grits his teeth, muttering that he will let the matter slide for today. He turns to call for Lisa, signaling a retreat. He walks away, his posture stiff, leaving the confrontation unresolved but clearly having lost the upper hand. Bridget watches him go, her gaze then shifting to Yuri, who recalls his spirit with a casual gesture, seemingly unaffected by the fact that he just stared down a member of the royal family. Bridget analyzes Yuri as the hallway clears. She notes his cold, brusque demeanor and acknowledges that, like her, he is disliked by the general student body for his unapproachable nature. However, she sees something else in him, a steadfast refusal to bend. Despite his isolation and the hatred directed at him, Yuri remains true to himself, looking straight ahead without seeking validation. Bridget feels a surge of admiration for his strength. She realizes he is a noble with no lovable qualities in the traditional sense, yet his independence makes him cool in her eyes. She finds herself wishing she could possess that same level of self-assurance. Yuri interrupts her internal monologue, speaking to her directly for the first time. He expresses mild surprise that she showed up to the academy today, considering the public humiliation she recently endured. He identifies her as the Count's daughter, his tone factual rather than mocking. Bridget looks at him, surprised by the acknowledgement. The interaction serves as a catalyst for her own internal shift. As she walks away, a new resolve hardens within her. She realizes that Joseph is no longer protecting her, which means she is forced to face the world head-on. This realization transforms from fear into liberation. Bridget understands that since she is no longer Joseph's fiancée, the restrictive expectations placed upon her have vanished. She tells herself that the breakup is an opportunity. She can now live her life exactly as she wants. She can date whoever she chooses. She considers changing her makeup, discarding the look she maintained for Joseph's sake. The weight of the engagement lifts, replaced by a sense of autonomy she hasn't felt in years. Her focus shifts immediately to her academic redemption. She marches into the library and slams a stack of heavy books onto a desk. She acknowledges that her grades have plummeted to the bottom of the class because she neglected her studies to chase after the prince. She picks up a book titled, The History of Research into Spirits, determining that it is time to reclaim her original dream. She tells herself that becoming a spirit researcher is not impossible if she applies herself. She remembers that she always enjoyed studying